俺は自分の死を思うときこの表について考える。奴はなぜ、何のためにそんな高知へとやってきたのか。獲物を追いさまよううちに、戻ることのできない場所へ迷い込んでしまったのか。それとも何かを求め、疲れたように高みへと登り詰め、力尽きて倒れたのか。奴の死体はどんなだったろう。戻ろうとしていたのか。それともなお高みへと登ろうとしていたのか。いずれにせよ、奴はもう二度と戻れないことを知っていたに違いない。
So a couple of months back, I started watching Banana Fish. I kinda started this show without knowing anything about it except that it's from a shonen ai genre. Yes, I know, it was a very simplified way to explain this anime, but that's all the information which was given to me. As a result, I expected a somewhat interesting plot that will focus on the romance between the two characters. But as the story started to unfold, I realized how deep and heart-wrenching this show is. Banana Fish is much more than a simple shonen ai plot. It's a dark story that dealt with a lot of social and psychological issues. And Ash Lyx, the protagonist of Banana Fish, suffered from every kind of trauma possible for a person to suffer. Ash was presented to us as a magnificent, intelligent, and handsome gangster of New York City who seemed more mature than his age. We see him running around, scaring people off to manage the underground peace, and at the same time taking care of his brother. A 17-year-old gang leader had more on his plate than any person of his age. Despite acting like a hardcore gangster and fighting underground, Ash holds the darkest and saddest trauma inside him, which slowly unfolded throughout the story. We see Ash from the perspective of Eiji Nakamura, a young assistant photographer who met Ash by chance, and their meeting led them to a path that was both sad, depressing, and at the same time, life-changing. Ash was a victim of sexual abuse. He was raped brutally when he was only 8 years old. Moreover, he was accused of provoking the man to have sexual intercourse with him. In short, Ash was victim blamed. In our society, blaming the victim is sadly a common practice. But the effect it has on the person who went through the whole process is horrifying and barbaric. Not only they are socially tortured, but they go through horrible psychological and emotional issues which makes their life hard. Banana Fish did an amazing job portraying the horrendous nature of victim blaming through the actions and sufferings of Ash Lyx. Victim blaming occurs when the victim of a crime or any wrongful act is held entirely or partially at fault for the harm that befell them. As the definition suggests, Ash Lyx was blamed and held responsible for the assault as the main culprit was a renowned figure in the town. One of the most common psychological effects of victim blaming includes severe depression. The victim falls into the depth of despair where they feel helpless and powerless, which eventually make them depressed. The blame works as the secondary assault and it eventually enhances the post-traumatic experience of the victim. In the case of Ash, after the incident of rape and being victim blamed by the police, he felt powerless. Children who are victim blamed will take those harsh statements as true and continue to believe them for many years to come. When Ash was sexually abused, his father's words of not being able to do anything against the people in power were imprinted in his mind. Just as his father told him, Ash concealed his emotions and endured the sexual violence forced upon him. The victim and And in this case, Ash didn't have any window to express how he felt, what he felt, and the things that were going through his mind. The blame game made it difficult for him to talk openly about his issues, and as a result, he had no chance of processing his emotions. His compressed feelings made it harder for him to deal with, and at one point, the emotions burst in a form of extreme rage as you see him killing the perpetrator. If a person grows up believing they are the root of all problems, they start self-blaming, which was apparent in Ash's behavior. Ash continuously blamed himself in front of AG. Although he portrayed a strong demeanor around everyone and showed a stoic personality, deep down, Ash was suffering. He believed himself to be a martyr. He believed himself not worthy to be a good human being. This tendency to perceive oneself negatively also creates a suicidal urge among the victims. They consciously and subconsciously start taking actions that will harm them. Ash had little to no care for his own life, and we see him constantly risking his life to save others. It may look like an act of heroism at first glance, but if we look deeper into it, we can understand Ash's recklessness is due to not loving himself enough. The self-blame and feeling of powerlessness also create a sense of submission in the victim. The victim starts taking molestation and abuse more willingly, as they think they have no power against the abuser. Because there is a fear they won't be believed. A fear that they'll have to deal with all those negative feedbacks. In Banana Fish, we witness Ash selling his body a couple of times to save himself and others. He acted as if his body is a separate entity from him, as if the abusers don't matter anymore, as long as he can reach his goal. Except for being with AG, Ash hardly showed any emotions. According to Ash's personal experiences, he learned that human emotions will only get in his way. If he didn't become an emotionless being, he won't be able to murder another person in cold blood. The curse of victim blaming makes it harder for the person to deal with their feelings, as well as harder to connect with other people. And ultimately, it stands in the way of recovery. As previously explained, Ash wasn't able to work through his trauma. Moreover, he repeatedly went through the same or worse treatment from various abusers. He couldn't connect with anyone. He couldn't believe anyone. No one could have given Ash a sense of comfort amidst all those chaos until AG came into his life. AG was the first person who believed Ash, who supported and empathized towards him, and acted with sheer kindness which was unknown to Ash. It was for AG that Ash started to recover slowly from the traumas and nightmares. It is surprising how much the act of kindness and compassion can heal a person's suffering, and AG was able to do so. But Banana Fish, the story of our golden-haired wildcat, never supposed to have a happy ending. After all those sufferings and losing so many close people in his life, Ash was gradually healing, until the day he was killed. His death was a shock to us audience. His death was hard to deal with. When you think about the ending, it truly showed the full circle and consequence of societal blaming on the victim. If Ash was alive, he and AG may have lived a happy life in a small town in Japan. But the experiences Ash went through his whole life was something that can break a person completely. And it may take a lifetime to get over these negative feelings of shame and trauma. Ash Ash's journey and his whole life were depicted tragically throughout the story of Banana Fish. Ash may be a fictional character, but the sufferings he endured as a victim of sexual abuse is very common in our society. Any kind of abuse can create a lot of negative emotions among the victims. And blaming the victim instead of providing them with appropriate support can only make it worse. On the other hand, a simple gesture of kindness and compassion may help the victim work through their traumas and become confident with their own life. Ash had a tragic life. But if we are careful with how we behave with another sufferer, they may not end up having a sad ending like him. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments if you want me to discuss a particular character, trope or story. If you like the video, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button.